Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Brad Mulvey, who is on a journey to turn his dreams into reality. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Epictetus, and it's from about 2,000 years ago, but it's still relevant today. Start living your ideals. Now is the time to get serious about living your ideals. Once you have determined the spiritual principles you wish to exemplify, abide by these rules as if they were laws, as if they were indeed sinful to compromise them. Don't mind if others don't share your conviction. How long can you afford to put off who you really want to be? Your nobler self cannot wait any longer. Put your principles into practice now. Stop the excuses and the procrastination. This is your life. You aren't a child anymore. The sooner you set yourself up to your spiritual program, the happier you will be. The longer you wait, the more you will be vulnerable to mediocrity and feel filled with shame and regret because you know you are capable of better. From this instant on, vow to stop disappointing yourself. Separate yourself from the mob. Decide to be extraordinary and do what you need to do now. Our guest today, Brad, is going to share how he lives those ideals in his life. One of the ways we can live like this is to change our mindsets. In the next episode, we're going to learn about our biases and how it affects our mindsets. We all have a view of the world, and for most of us, it was created when we were kids. If you haven't questioned it, challenged it, and continued to grow, then you're stuck. We get caught in the drift. And one day we wake up and we wonder how we got there. It doesn't have to be this way. Small changes can move you into a different direction, one that serves you so much better. Brad and I are going to chat about how he did that in his life. Brad Mulvey is a husband, podcast host, personal development thought leader, and data-driven marketing consultant. He hosts the Millennial Mastermind podcast, a show dedicated to giving entrepreneurial millennials the tools, tactics, and inspiration to turn their dreams into reality. Each week, he interviews successful entrepreneurs, authors, thought leaders, and experts to share their stories and their advice on how to create a life worth living. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Brad Mulvey. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, Rocky. I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I'm excited for the conversation.
Me as well.
We always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really gets to the root of a lot of the way that I live my life. And realization didn't come until much reflection on the topic. But I was blessed to grow up in a upper middle class family, had an interesting relationship with money from a community aspect because I grew up in a smaller community that had both very, very wealthy individuals as well as a lot of folks on the other side of the spectrum, all within a pretty tight geographical area. Growing up and going to school, I had friends who had parents who flew their own private jets or had a basketball court attached to their house. And then I also had friends who lived in essentially double wide trailers. And I was spending time at each of these different types of homes and with these different families from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And it showed me a few different things. One, the folks who were very well off were really no different than I was or than my parents were or anybody else. They had just made different decisions along the way that led them to that path. But the other interesting aspect of it was being in that ecosystem growing up. There tended to be a lot of comparing yourself to the Joneses and trying to keep up with the Joneses, which was something that, again, I didn't recognize really in the heat of the moment or as I was growing up. But when looking back on it, it blew me away to see what I now realize were individuals and families who were in totally different economic situations, but were trying to spend at the same level as some of these ultra wealthy individuals. And it just didn't pan out well in the long term. So that's something that has really stuck with me. And I've taken learnings from that now I apply to my own life and has really given me this lens to approach life with a long-term approach. And I'm thankful and blessed for that opportunity to have seen that at a young age. But it was very interesting growing up, having just those two different worldviews really mashed together.
And I grew up in something similar. I think it was a different time. I guess when I was in grade school was right around the time when they were kind of forcing the ending of, it wasn't that we lived in a segregated place, but they were forcing you to cross boundaries. So one half of the town was extremely rich. The other half of the town was, as you said, they were not well off. But what they started doing was moving kids from one half of the town to school in the other half of the town and pushing them back and forth to kind of create more of an integration. And I remember hearing a lot of conversations from the kids about they all wanted to be in their own space. They didn't want to be on the other side of the tracks either way from where they were.
It's interesting how at such a young age, you start to make that differentiation in your mind. And a lot of it's just passed down based on the interactions and the actions of your parents and what you've seen and what you've grown up with. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing to see at a young age.
Well, and most people's money mindsets are created somewhere between 5 and 12. And during that time period, which is essentially very young age, and that's when your money mindsets and your behaviors and so forth are created. And hopefully they're done right. If they're not, you can spend a lifetime chasing after the Joneses.
Indeed.
I guess that's interesting. So are you telling me these people who were at the lower end were trying to actually spend at that high a differential? Because that's a pretty big differential.
Yeah, I guess I should not say it at the same level, but you would see not just those two extremes, but everybody in between. And so maybe when the extremes come in a little closer and you take out some of those outliers, you start to see wealth gaps that are still significant, but people can keep up the appearance of having a lifestyle and a level of wealth they don't necessarily have. Being around that and seeing that play out over the long haul, you could tell that it's not sustainable. And I saw that in my own life with friends and family and people close to us who weren't able to maintain that level of spending which they never should have attempted to in the beginning. But you get into that comparison game and you get into that mindset of trying to appear to be at the same level or further ahead in life than somebody else. And it really does put you in a tough situation in your family, a tough situation that can be devastating in the long term.
That it can. You always have to live within your means. Otherwise, not so great things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice a difference in happiness between the different economic groups?
No. And thinking back on it, you could go to one person's house and they have a pool and a water slide and a hot tub and the whole setup. And it's a beautiful thing that these individuals were able to create right on their home that looked more like a resort sometimes. Versus you might go to another friend's house where all that they had was their property backed up to a lot of woods. And you spent the afternoon playing in the woods as young boys will do and getting into trouble and nicking yourself up. But there was no different level of happiness. I think what I realized is that your happiness is based on what you make of it and your ability to be grateful for what you do have and just take your own financial situation and accept where you are. Not to say you shouldn't strive to push the needle ahead, but the people who were comfortable in their own skin and their own situations were the ones who always seemed to be the happiest.
It's just gratitude for what you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's comparing yourself to where you were, not to someone else's race. And that's
right.
Kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
You grew up, you went to college, I'm assuming, and then you got into a corporate job. Is that correct?
I did, yeah. I grew up in Ohio and then moved out to Chicago for several years. Corporate sales role. Started living that life of a young single guy in the big city where I quickly met my wife. And before I knew it, we were living together and moving back to the Cleveland area where we're from, where I stayed in a corporate role, which is where I was commuting over an hour each direction. So I lived on the total opposite side of town, and that's where I discovered the world of podcasting. I was in a role that I really wasn't fulfilled with what I was doing. It was, sure, a good company, average pay, but I left there feeling unfulfilled. And that hour commute for the longest time felt like torture to me because I knew I was going to do something where I wasn't making the money I thought I could make. I wasn't making the impact that I knew I could. And there was just this potential inside of me that I knew I wasn't even scratching the surface of. And like I said, that's when I discovered podcasts. And that's really what opened up the personal development world for me, because I was able to be introduced to information that I had no idea existed. Up to that point was of the mindset that I had graduated college, like you mentioned. My education was over. I didn't have any intention to going back for postgraduate degrees, but I also wasn't of the mindset that I could be self-educating and that I could be seeking out the information that really could have a massive impact in my life. And all of a sudden, this switch flipped where I realized, oh my God, I have 2 hours every single day where I'm just sitting in my car and it's dead time right now. I'm listening to things like sports radio or music, things that weren't bringing any additional value to my life. And it was really a slippery slope for me in the most positive way possible, where all of a sudden I was just drinking out of the fire hose, taking in as much information as I could about personal development and entrepreneurship and business. And I realized, wait a minute, there is a path for me outside of following the corporate ladder that could make my wildest dreams come true. That was all discovered just in that morning and evening commute to start, was where it all began.
And then what did you do? You got this knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
From there, it was what I had realized was that there were a lot of people who were talking about personal development and entrepreneurship in a way that was really targeted towards current entrepreneurs. And a lot of the information, a lot of things around mindset and strategies and tools and tactics for success were very applicable if you had a business. And that wasn't me. And I was sitting there feeling a little bit lost, not quite sure where to go next. And that's when I realized there could be an opportunity for me to fill that gap. I enjoyed those topics so much that I decided, why not have conversations with the experts who are already who have the knowledge that I am seeking, and record those conversations. And that was probably about 3.5 years ago when that light bulb went off. And that's when I started my show, the Millennial Mastermind podcast, to begin having these interesting conversations with individuals who have started their own businesses, are thought leaders in the space, who have written books about how to create businesses and create the life of your dreams. And 150 episodes later, we're still going strong.
And you've had some amazing guests on your show, many that I have read and listened to in the past myself. What were some of the most surprising things that you've learned from those interviews?
I think the first thing that now it almost seems obvious to me, but back then it was a brand new concept and it kept coming up over and over again, and still does, is that the most successful and most fulfilled individuals I was talking to weren't only filling a need that they saw when they created their business, which of course is an important aspect of launching a business, but they were doing something that was truly important to them and adding value to lives of others. And for me, I had always thought of entrepreneurship and business ownership as an avenue to create wealth, to change your life and create a business that is going to really help you get to where you want to go. What I hadn't thought about as much is how you can use a business to create so much value for other people that their lives are changing for the positive, and that you're having extraordinary impact in the world. And what I was realizing is that there were so many people who I was talking to, is that was the whole basis for their business, and their own personal income and wealth development from there was obviously a desired outcome. But taking that out of that driver's seat and replacing it with the impact and the value that they could add for their customers or for the people that they cared about, those were the people who I could just tell were lighting up as I was having these conversations. And it really shifted my paradigm of how I was thinking about starting a business and how I was thinking about approaching entrepreneurship and approaching the market with an idea.
And entrepreneurship is coming back again, because it used to be probably 100 years plus ago, everyone was essentially an entrepreneur. You had your local blacksmith and your local tailor and your local small business people. There weren't all these, everything wasn't corporate. And so people did learn to do that. And then we got away from it. And it seems like as the economy is changing, that we are heading back that direction again. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's very true. I think people who create businesses solely for the purpose of making money do not have a great life, in the sense that they're chasing a buck all the time. And sometimes they probably end up doing things that they don't want to do to make $1. And it's not fun. Whereas the people who are excited about what they're doing, they tap dance to work, so to speak, right? It's fun. It's enjoyable. They love what they're doing, and it shines through when they talk to people and when they talk to their customers, because they're just so excited about what they do.
Yeah. And the truth is, if you're starting a business, it takes a lot of time. There's no shortcuts. There's no way around it. You're going to be spending a significant percentage of your time and your life working on this thing. It is only logical from my perspective to make that thing something that you enjoy doing, a topic that you really want to be immersed in and day out, because that's what it's going to take for that business to be successful. So once I made that connection, it was just a light going off. I'd always thought, okay, find something you're passionate about and something that people are looking for, something, a true need. But then also mixing in that third element of something that's going to make a positive impact for the people that you're serving. And serving is probably the key word there, was the one that really got the wheel spinning for me.
And when you help people and you serve them, they're more than happy to do business with you, and they're throwing money at you, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're helping them to do that. And I think that's very true, because I think people may be stuck in a job they don't like. And there are a lot of people who aren't really running a business. They aren't really entrepreneurs. It's more that they bought themselves a job. You know, they're still stuck in the grind. It's just that there's no one else to blame for the grind except themselves, because it's their own business. And that's what it is, which is a shame. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy, though, to figure out what you want to do and what you love and what your talents are. And then also to actually know how to make money at it, because what I see with a lot of business owners is they love what they do, but they don't focus on the numbers and they don't focus on the profit. And in doing that, they really struggle. I don't know how did the people that you talk to, or even yourself, bring balance to, hey, this is what I love doing, but also focus on the numbers and the business side of it?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it comes back to the money mindset that we were talking about earlier, and realizing that you're creating value for whoever your customers are, whatever it is, whatever the service or product that you're providing is. People, if they're willing to use that thing, do that thing, purchase whatever it is that you're selling, you're providing a value to them. And this was a hurdle for me to overcome as well. So the business side for my show and my business is that we host mastermind groups and live events. And at first, I was so afraid to put a price tag on those. And I would just think, well, what would I be willing to pay? And I just kept bumping that number down then, because I was like, well, I'm sure other people wouldn't want to pay that much. And all that was doing was shooting myself and my opportunity to expand the business right in the foot. And it really took external factors and friends and mentors telling me and sharing that you have to be willing not only to give, because you're putting all this content out there, you're putting so much time into this project. Clearly, you're willing to give. But if you're not willing to receive and you're not willing to ask, then this will never become anything more than a hobby. And that's where it started to shift for me, is seeing the people who I really respected and who are doing very, very well in their own businesses and have businesses and families and lives that I admire, that could show me that path and really lay that out in front of me in a way that made total sense, that I'm not making a hard sell. I'm not taking from the customers. It's that I am offering something of such great value that they're more than happy to exchange dollars for that service, because what they're getting in return is worth that and much more to them. And it's really just was a shift in mindset from that point for me. But you're right, because you can do something that you love all day long, but if you're not able to keep the lights on and pay the bills, then it's all for naught. So it's important to recognize that and to be strategic in coming up with a business plan and a strategy that allows you to provide what it is that you love, but also in a fashion and in a way that's going to allow you to achieve your goals and have the life that you desire.
Absolutely. You have to appropriately price something for value that it provides versus the actual costs that may go into it. And that's especially true for businesses that are your work. What I mean by that is selling a product versus your time. Especially when you're selling your time, you have to be much more intentional with that and make sure that you're charging appropriate for the value that's delivered, and not just coming up with a number that's way too low for what you do.
Yeah, because in these knowledge-based businesses, where you're not actually delivering a physical product, it is hard to come up with that pricing scheme. And it's easy to undervalue yourself and what you're offering, especially as you're getting started and as you're new to the scene. But that's where you have to just be resilient in your efforts and understand that even if you're not necessarily providing something that is, so when I think about the knowledge-based business with things like coaching or memberships or online courses, you don't have to be light years ahead of the person that you're coaching, teaching, or providing value to. You just have to be one step ahead of them, because especially if you've already lived through whatever, say it's a cooking class, you've spent your hours in the kitchen. You've spent your time screwing up recipes. If you've tried to bake that cake and ruined it 5 times just to figure out how to do it right after it's all said and done, if you're able to teach the next person who comes through the door how to do it right the first try, you're adding so much value to them. And that's obviously a simple example, but there's so many of these knowledge-based businesses where you shouldn't be teaching somebody something that's light years ahead of where they're at now, because they won't be able to grasp it and take action on it. And B, you're helping them avoid the mistakes and the pitfalls. And that can be a massive value when you're saving them time, especially when you're talking about years that you could be saving them based on mistakes that you've witnessed or things that you've learned or mistakes that you've made yourself. Those are a few things I try to keep in mind.
And that's very true. At this point in my life, having Tiger Woods as a golf coach would be utterly useless for my golf swing. I need somebody way down, because he's going to be talking to me about things that are so slight and so the slight edge that makes the difference. For me, not even close. Like, those things don't matter. The clubs don't even matter for me. So I need to I need to get a coach who's at my level, who can help me where I'm at. And I think that is a very, very important distinction.
Yeah, that analogy hits a little too close to home for me. I'm right there with you. The clubs don't even matter.
So one of the things I've heard you talk about is intentionally surrounding yourself with people who will help you level up. How do you do that? How do you find those kinds of people?
Yeah, it's so important, because I'll just use myself as an example. Coming out of college, going into my career in Chicago and then back here in Ohio, I had some great friends. I had people that I trusted with my life, but they were very content with going down that corporate route, some very successfully, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when my dream was to go down the entrepreneurship route and start my own business that would provide the life that I had dreamed about, and they couldn't relate to that vision, or worse yet, really they couldn't understand it and support me in that because it was so different from their idea of success, that becomes a deterring factor in my success, when they're not going out of their way to sabotage me or anything like that, but they're not able to really help me get to where I need to be. So there was no point in time where I was going to write those people out of my life. But I realized if I wanted to create this business and this life that I had a vision for, I needed to be surrounded by people who would be able to make that happen. And there's a few different ways that you can do it. The first and the easiest is to, I am saying surround in air quotes, with the experts who are already putting content out there. And this is surrounding yourself with mentors who you don't actually know in person. These are people who they have podcasts, they have written books, they have communities online and courses that you can purchase and be a part of, where you can start to surround yourself with that person's ideas and that person's knowledge without actually being physically with them or in the room with them. I think that's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to get started. And anybody who's listening to this podcast, I'm sure, has already taken that step, and they've done that with you, Rocky, and they're learning from you and the guests that you bring onto the show and any other content that they're consuming. The next there's two more I'd like to talk about. One is surrounding yourself with peers who can really push you forward, and the other is surrounding yourself with mentors who can help show you the path. I think that starting with the peer group, what you need to do is find a community that already exists of people who are doing the things that you want to do. That can be something local that you can meet up with these people in person, maybe through something like meetup.com, where in just about any city, you're going to find a meetup group for interest all across the board. And say entrepreneurship is what you're looking to do. There's probably 10 of them. So just go to one of those, introduce yourself, and start getting around people who may have a similar mindset that you do. Or that can be online communities. That's getting involved even just in free Facebook groups and reaching out to people, introducing yourself virtually, having a phone call. It doesn't have to be grabbing a cup of coffee, which is great if you have that opportunity. But we're living in a digital era where you can create true, meaningful, genuine relationships without actually ever being in the room with somebody, which is a beautiful thing. But you have to put in the work to be able to vet out and find those people who are out there. But then on the mentorship side, it takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit harder to prove yourself, but that's just finding individuals who have done something that you want to accomplish. And like I said earlier, they could just be one step ahead of you. That for me has been individuals who are actually years younger than me, but are ahead of me in terms of where they're at in their entrepreneurial journeys. And so it's finding and identifying those people and then approaching them and starting to build a relationship. I think with any of these things, building a network, finding mentors, we put these labels on them. But at the end of the day, it's really just building a meaningful relationship or a friendship with these people that becomes so much deeper than just a person in your network or a quote unquote mentor. It's actually having people who care about you and you care about them and feeding into those relationships. That's where I would get started.
I am surprised at how few people take action. Even people who will say, I'm going to go to a conference to learn about X, and they're at the conference. And even then they don't take action and they don't connect and they leave and they do nothing. And it's just doing little stuff adds up to big things. And we'll talk about that more in a while.
It's uncomfortable. And a lot of us aren't used to having to put ourselves out there. And especially I'm younger and not even 30 yet, but growing up, there was always this sense of having friendships built in, whether it's through your school, your organizations you're involved with, even in college, being involved in different extracurriculars, or being in a dorm with new people who are all in the same phase of life. But then you get a little bit older and reaching out to random strangers who you've never met before and trying to build a meaningful connection, it can be an awkward thing. Like you can't just really email somebody out of the blue and say, "Hey, will you be my friend?" It doesn't work great, and it may make you sound a little weird. But you can, if you're willing to take that action. I like how you put that, Rocky. People just don't take action, but if you're willing to put yourself out there and start building those relationships, it's very easily done. You just have to step out of your comfort zone.
And you do. I email people cold all the time. And now I'm to the point, if I'm going into a city, I'll look up people who are there. I'm like, hey, we chatted a couple times on email and I'm in your city. Do you want to meet for coffee? You have to, you'd be surprised at how often people will say yes and how often people will want to connect and learn. And successful people are always looking for successful people who take action. So they're looking for that as well in their life because it's just as important to them as it is to you. I think part of that comes because of something else that you talked about, and that is becoming someone people want to connect with. We'll be back with our guest, Brad, in a moment. Taking action is the key to living an amazing life. Profit is the fuel. I'm amazed at how few business owners look at their bottom line and take action to creating profit. I know it's sometimes hard to do all the different things we're talking about in this episode. I've already done many of them. I help people not only create profit, but then intentionally use that profit and take baby steps to creating an amazing life on their terms. Are you ready to take action but don't know where to begin? One session with me helps you find clarity. Many of my clients meet with me a couple times a month to keep making small improvements to creating the life of their dreams. It all starts with having the excess money to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. Now, let's get back to the amazing conversation with Brad as he talks about becoming the person people want to be with. So how do you become someone that people say, I want to know Brad?
I think there's a few different ways. I think the starting point is once you meet somebody or start to build a relationship with somebody, is looking for ways to add value to them. And for me, the easiest way historically to do that was to be introducing them to other people who I've met in my journey, who I think would be beneficial for them knowing. And that's a pretty easy way to start adding value to anybody, and not just making introductions and firing off introduction emails that aren't going to be mutually beneficial for both parties involved. I'm a big fan of the double opt-in, checking with both individuals and making sure they're up for an introduction before I actually make an introduction. But it's a way that you can start piecing together who you know in your network who might be able to benefit from knowing one another. And it takes you out of the equation where you don't have to be the linchpin. Say there's somebody that you know who's very successful in sales company A and somebody successful in sales company B who may have some similar personality traits that you think they had hit it off. You don't need to be part of the conversation. You just need to introduce them and see where it goes. It may go nowhere and they may not be interested in pursuing those relationships, but that may become a lifelong friend, and they'll always remember that you're the one who introduced them. That's a simple way to do it. I think another way is starting to build up your own personal brand. And what I mean by that is what people know you for and what contribution that you're making and putting out into the world. So for me, that was starting the podcast and really becoming a source of knowledge for people. And what I started to see was, instead of just being, young professional Brad who's doing all right in his corporate job, who's a fun guy to have a beer with every once in a while, I became this interesting person who, a podcast, what's that all about? Oh, how'd you get started in that? Oh, you should talk to my other friend who has a YouTube channel, or you should talk to this person who is a successful entrepreneur. And all of a sudden, it gave people a reason to introduce me to other people in their network. And it becomes this snowball effect where then I have more people in my network who I'm building true relationships with and looking to add value to them. And I see the connection with this person who I interviewed on the podcast last month. So maybe you two would get along pretty well. Would you like an introduction? And it's just it becomes this fun game of just adding value where you can. And the introduction is just one way to do that. Sometimes you're going to have actual knowledge that can help that person in their journey. Maybe they're looking to do something that you did, and you could become a mentor to a degree to them. So I think that there's plenty of ways that you can do it, but just approaching each relationship in your immediate life with how do I add value to this person rather than what can I take from this is the first step to becoming somebody who attracts new relationships and new people into your life who are going to make more meaningful and a joyful experience for you on this planet.
And that's a mindset shift. It's changing from the focus on you to focusing on them. And I've noticed, I think in the past, and this is dramatically shifted, but in the past, people were very hesitant to share their network or to share their connections. They felt like it was like piece of pie. And if you shared it, you made a piece of the pie was gone and things got smaller. I think now people are understanding that it's not a piece of pie. It's much bigger. And when you start to share connections, things grow. They don't contract. You don't lose, you build. And that's a big shift in understanding that you do need to help people connect with others. And there are still people out there who refuse to do it. And when you look at them, you see that their networks get smaller and smaller and smaller. They're not growing because they refuse to be open to sharing.
Yeah, it's that abundance versus that scarcity mindset. Just realizing, I mean, we live in a big world, and it's they say it's getting smaller every day with technology, but I think that the opportunities keep growing, and there's so much opportunity for all of us out there, and none of us have the same unique attributes, our unique things that we bring to the table, and that mindset, that scarcity around sharing your network, it just blows my mind because you're missing out so much on the opportunity, to live a more meaningful life because you're actually providing value to the people who you're surrounded by with currently, but the opportunity just to connect with so many more amazing people who may be just 1 degree away from you currently that could change your life forever, or could just be a fun person to sit down, have a coffee with, and get to know a little bit.
That is very true. And so we touched on this, and we'll get back to it, which is essentially to take baby steps, invest your time, do the work, because the compounding of this is massive over time. And I know you're still young, but have you started to see compounding results in what you're doing? Absolutely. And I see it with the podcast, and that's an easy one to actually look at the numbers, and you can see how many people are tuning in, how many people that you're reaching. But also I'm seeing it just within the relationships in my life, the people who I've attracted into my life and who I've been gifted the opportunity to know. And I look around, and there are individuals who I never thought I'd be playing on the same field as them 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. And now these are people that I have their phone numbers and I can text and they'll respond to me. And every year, it seems like I look in the mirror and I do my reflection at the end of the year, and I am overwhelmed with the progress that I've made, both personally and professionally. And they say that every 7 years, your body regenerates its cells to the point where you're not even the same actual person anymore. Every single cell in your body is rejuvenated. So you can say quite literally, 10 years ago, I was a different person. And I recognize that in my own life of 5 years ago, I hardly even understood what personal development was about. 4 years ago, I may have read a book or two. And then each year, it's just gotten deeper and more extreme in terms of my knowledge of the space, the people that I'm connected with in the space, and the things that I've learned. And what I've learned in the past compounds on what I'm learning today. And all of a sudden, these connections are made that really ingrains those types of things in my mind and my being and how I approach my life and the world. So absolutely, the compound effect is an amazing aspect, not just in finance and investment, but within personal development as well. It's just Darren Hardy has a book called The Compound Effect, and that's turned me on to this idea, and it totally shifted my perspective that the little things that we're doing every day to better ourselves compound on one another, and really have an amazing impact in the short term, sure. But as time goes on, if you continue to do those things, totally change your life. I think that was the book. In that book, he described the three men who made small changes to their diet and exercise, wasn't it? Yeah. Yep. And that was really interesting. I mean, he took three guys, and one basically did nothing different. I think just had like an extra beer and a candy bar a day. and one actually just did light exercise. And he looks at them 6 months later, and they all look pretty much the same. And even out at a year, you start to see slight differences. But when you go out a few years, you see massive differences. One guy's in shape, the other guy's nowhere near in shape, because teeny little things add up. And over time, boy, do things really separate.
Yeah, because those little habits build on one another. It might just be a little bit of exercise, maybe a morning walk in the beginning and for the first year. But then based on that healthy way of starting the day, you decide, instead of having a McDonald's breakfast sandwich this morning, maybe I'll get a parfait. And then it's just these little decisions that over time support one another, because you do something that's trending in the right direction, that it encourages you to tweak your habits to follow on that path. And as you look at that over time, like you said, that trajectory in the beginning might not make a huge impact or noticeable impact from the outside, but you see somebody's lifestyle and their mental approach to things, and it's vastly different 5, 10, 20 years down the road because of those habits that were developed earlier on. And those are things that you can start at any age. It's not just a young person's game. It's something that's just make a few small tweaks in your life now and stick with it, and you'll see dividends on that from those compounding effects down the road.
Absolutely. And one day you realize that breakfast doesn't even need to exist. You can skip the meal entirely. There's no need for it.
You get in that intermittent fasting game.
Absolutely. So you're big into fitness too, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Anything in particular that you do, or?
I do play around with the intermittent fasting. I'd say the one thing that's really changed the game for me has been from shifting away from doing my own made up workouts and exercise plans to actually finding regimens and plans that I could stick to that lay out exactly what I'm doing day to day, week by week, and following those. And it's easy to do. So for a very tactical thing for anybody listening, I have an app that's called Fit Plan that I think costs maybe $60 a year that just gives you each day's exercise. But what's great, and you can find this online for free too, just by Googling fitness plan and a keyword of what you're looking to do, whether it's lose weight or gain muscle mass. There's going to be 100 different ones out there that you can write down in your notebook. But rather than just going in without a plan every day, it's as if for people who go in and look at their calendar at the beginning of the day and time block how they're using their time. If you just do that, spend 10 minutes in the morning doing that, you can see that. Try it tomorrow. If you've never tried it, you will have a much more productive day than when you just go in and as the whack-a-moles of daily life come up, you're bashing them on the head. Instead, you're intentionally approaching your calendar and your day. It's the same deal. If you walk in the gym and just say, okay, I'm going to do fitness today, and then you're like, where should I start? You're going to have a much less effective training session than if you have a pre-scheduled plan ahead of you that you can just dive right into full go. And
it's important that you have it beforehand so you don't have to think, because then that takes it out of the whole, well, should I do this? Should I do that? No, you just go take action.
Yep.
Here's my thing. Here's what I do. And I have the same thing. I lift weights, but I have an app on my thing, and I have the A routine for Mondays and the B routine for Fridays. And it's got a timer and everything. And I don't have to think. I know what I'm doing. I follow the app. I do that. And same thing even for my stretching stuff. I have video things, and I literally go in and, okay, today I'm going to do this plan. This is what I feel like. And I sit there with the trainer in front of me on the video, and I do it so I don't have to think, and you get it done.
Yeah. And it adds a layer of accountability, which is so important as well, that you know that you are on a plan that you're supposed to go into the gym 3, 4, 5 times this week, whatever it might be. And if you don't, then you fall behind. And this may just be the way that my brain works. But if I miss one of those and then my whole routine is bumped back a day, I'm beating myself up the rest of the week to try to catch up and get back on track. And so having that versus just kind of an open gym schedule where all right, I'm going to try to get there 3 times this week, and when I get there, I'll figure it out. There is that takes away that self accountability that is just built in by having a plan that you're working on and committed to.
And all of that stuff, my calendar rules my life. And I already know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is certain gyms, and Tuesday, Thursday is stretching stuff. So it just occurs. Now, sometimes things will bump it, but for the most part, it's 95% locked in stone for most of my stuff. And I run my day off my calendar because otherwise I forget everything. But it's on my calendar. It reminds me when I need to do stuff, when I have things, and it really, really helps to keep me focused and on track.
Yeah.
So that is very, very cool. One of the things that I know that you are big into is these masterminds. And masterminds is a relatively new word for something that I think has been going on for generations upon generations, which is basically a group of people coming together to have bigger, deeper conversations on life and focused on achieving certain goals. And when you bring people together from varied backgrounds who are that focused and hold each other accountable and help each other, I think amazing things happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on masterminds and how they've helped you.
Yeah, so I was first introduced to this concept by the legendary personal development author Napoleon Hill, who I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of and probably read. But in his book, Think and Grow Rich, which came out back in the 30s, he talks about this concept, and the way he defines it is a group of individuals, and this is my version of how he defines it, I should say, a group of individuals coming together in a spirit of harmony to achieve one goal. And when you have if you have 2 people, and the way he puts it is you have 2 minds come together, a third mind is created where ideas and solutions that neither of those 2 individuals could have come up with on their own individually would have brought to the table. But in working together, there are all of a sudden these new ideas generated. But when you add more than 2 people, that just makes it even better. So that's where I was first introduced to the concept. And it was actually in a conversation with random stranger on an airplane who explained this to me at first before I ever read the book, and I wasn't sure what the heck he was talking about. But then I dove into it and realized that this was a tool that I could plug into immediately to start getting my life on the track that I thought I should be on, or that I knew to get to that potential that I knew I could meet. And so, that's when I began interacting with other people's mastermind groups. There's plenty you can sign up with online. And then I developed one based off of the podcast. And that's actually where the name of my podcast came from, Millennial Mastermind. By no means calling myself a mastermind, because I'm certainly a student just along on the journey. But we created our own mastermind group that has been running for several years now.
And that is very cool. And I just find myself, even when I have conversations with somebody on a subject, just the fact that we're having the conversation starts to spark off ideas and things. And half the time I work it out myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because I had the intentional conversation, and that really helps to bring focus to a particular area that you're working on and really kind of pushes it forward.
Yeah, and I think in a more practical way of thinking of it for anybody who's listening is like a third mind. What the hell is this guy talking about? It's those deep conversations like you mentioned that force you to think about things differently. There's another people or another group of people looking at the same problem or objective or project or whatever it may be from whatever their life lenses are. Everybody has different experiences and way of approaching things. And when you look at a situation, you're seeing it from a completely different angle that somebody else is. And so hearing their perspective on it can quickly change how you're looking at it and give you a more holistic view. And that's where some of those new ideas start to generate. And it's just such a powerful tool. And it's not just for business and entrepreneurship. This can be around any topic. The largest mastermind in the world, if you can believe it, is Alcoholics Anonymous. If you think about it, it's a group of people coming together on a regular schedule with the same goal in mind, sobriety. And they're all working towards that. They're sharing their stories. They're sharing what's worked for them. They're sharing a process to all achieve group success. Individually, they have their goal, but as a group, they're all striving for the same thing. And that's just a prime example of how powerful it can be in changing somebody's life in a totally different situation other than business or entrepreneurship.
And I think a big reason that group also works is because they hold each other accountable. So you have an accountability partner as well who's checking in on you, and when you are struggling is there to help you through the struggle, which we all are going to struggle, and having people there to help you through that struggle definitely helps.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Rocky. Accountability is probably the biggest aspect of it from my perspective, and especially what we do. You get a group of individuals who really care about each other, but have also been vulnerable with each other and built such deep relationships that you can have some of that tough loving where, okay, you came in last week and said you were going to do this one thing that was going to push you towards your goal. You say now you didn't do it. What's up, doofus? Why didn't you do it? And having the ability to have those people in your life who can say that to you without you getting offended and hold you to that level of accountability is a powerful driver to change and to success.
And that's true. And the other thing that you mentioned that I also want to reiterate is looking at situations from multiple lenses. When you have people from very different walks of life and different experiences, when they all look at a situation, they're looking at it from their lens. And all those lenses are vastly different. And when you can look at a problem from 10 different lenses, it changes your ability to solve it, and it makes it just so much easier. I mean, I think I remember my kids like to play games, and I think there's a game called Boggle, and you have like these letters on the table, and you need to make words. And it always amazes me. My one daughter is amazing at the game. She always comes up with the most words. But even though she has the most words and she beats us by far, we each have words that she doesn't. And I'm always amazed by that. I'm like, wow, she came up with and she beat us, but yet she didn't see it all. We each had something that the other one didn't see. And I think that's true of life too. Everyone's got their own unique perspective, and learning to listen and examine all those other perspectives and being open to it and getting that feedback dramatically helps you create the success you want. And especially in entrepreneurship, if you're trying to start something new, having people look at that and say, hey, we already did that, and here are the 3 things we learned, I can save you a year of your time, is really helpful.
Yeah, I just had that experience probably a week or 2 ago. I was getting breakfast with a mentor of mine, and I was explaining this new project that I'm working on, this membership group. He totally shifted and rocked my world when he just said, well, what if you did this slightly different thing and approached it with this perspective instead? And it fundamentally changed how I was looking at this business plan without having those types of conversations, and those people who have been there, have done things in their life that you haven't experienced. Those things don't come up. It is very important. I like your analogy of the game as well.
It makes things go a lot faster, because if you've got someone else's experience, they can go, oh yeah, do X, Y, Z, go. And then you can, instead of sitting there going, what do I do first? You can just go take action. Because I think indecision is what prevents so many of us from taking the first step and then getting stuck while we're on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you wanted to share on the subject of turning your dreams into reality, but didn't get a chance to?
I think a word that you mentioned earlier just sticks out, and that's taking action. It's something that took me longer than I would have liked to figure out. But when you see something that you have an interest in pursuing, it's just taking the smallest step towards that thing. And in the beginning, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the most strategic step. It helps if it's well thought out, but just taking one small step towards accomplishing that, whether it's starting a business, whether it's starting a fitness routine, whether it's just doing anything in your life to make it better, get the momentum going, because momentum is a powerful force in this world. It requires you, the hardest step you're going to take is the first one to build up that momentum. So just start taking some level of action in whatever that thing is in your life that you've been thinking about. Anybody who's listening to this right now has something that just came into their mind of something that they've been putting off that they want to do. Take one small action towards that today, and I guarantee you'll be grateful for it a year from now.
And so I always say 0 to 1 is a lot harder than 1 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting that first step. And so I think you may have already answered the next question, which is, based on our conversation, what's one action step people can take this week to move forward? And maybe it's taking action, or maybe you have something better.
Well, I think that I still encourage the action step, but I guess one other thing that was relevant to our conversation is in developing true and meaningful relationships, we talked about adding value to people. And maybe just think of one person in your life who you want to build a better relationship. You want to nurture that relationship and bring it to the next level. Put some thought into how you can add value to their life. Maybe, like I said, it's an introduction to somebody else in your network, or maybe it's just doing something kind for that person, or writing them a thank you card out of the blue and handwritten and mailing that to them. Think of one thing that you could do to add value to that person, and do that this week. And I think that both you and they will be grateful for taking that one piece of action.
I did that last week. Actually, I handwrote a thank you card out to someone. I don't do it often. And I'm like, you know what? I should do this more often. And I actually did. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I love it. It was on my weekly goal list at one point to write at least one handwritten thank you card a week. And I've gotten away from it, but maybe based on this conversation, I'll get back to it, because there's been a number of times that has been a successful way, A, to really cheer somebody up or rekindle an old relationship, or B, to get in touch with somebody who, for example, an individual I wanted to have on the podcast, I wrote him a handwritten thank you card, just genuinely not asking him for anything, just saying thank you for the content that you put out. I found it really useful. He wrote me back, and I included my email address there, and he emailed me back saying, hey, got your card. That was really cool. Thanks. And then that started a dialogue that eventually led to me having him on the podcast. So you never know.
You never know until you try. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Gratitude. It's having a focused gratitude practice, and each day thinking of at least 3 things that I do it at the end of the day that I was grateful for that day. And all of a sudden practice that for a little while, and you'll start noticing how abundant this life really is.
And that's a perfect answer. I think when you change your expectations to appreciation and you're intentional with your gratitude, you do end up with an abundant life.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn later in life that you wished you would have learned sooner?
The importance of continued self-education, not just relying on traditional education and not thinking that when you're done with school, you're done with learning. There's always more to learn, and you'll be a happier, healthier, and wealthier person for it.
And that's very true. I know with my kids unfortunately got stuck with a dad who's going to be in self-development. And so, it's like, don't let your education get in the way of you learning.
That's a great way of putting it.
Because we pulled our kids out of high school so that they could actually go learn. I think it's changed the course of both of them. They have the freedom to truly learn and to dig into things. And it's really cool.
That's beautiful.
What one piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
It would be to focus on building quality relationships over quantity. Really taking a step back from the whole scene of trying to get to loading up your network, loading up your friend group, being the popular guy, but finding those meaningful relationships in your life and really going deep on those rather than expanding out to the masses.
And that's true. I mean, most people have a handful of good friends, and if you can do that, it doesn't matter beyond that. I mean, that's truly what you need.
Yeah.
If people would like to find you, connect, listen to your podcast, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, they could check it out at Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Put that into any podcasting listening app, wherever you're listening to this now. You can also check it out at millennialmm.com. And for anybody who is looking to get more into personal development or just curious about some of the tools that I have found to be helpful, I compiled a list of the resources that I have personally found to be the most helpful in my personal development journey, but also that have been shared with me by guests and mentors that have really been impactful. So they could check that out. It's totally free. You could get that at millennialmm.com/toolkit.
And thank you for sharing that. I will make sure to put that in the show notes as well, so it makes it easy for people to do that. And I encourage you all to check it out. And somebody offers you stuff for free, doesn't hurt to take a peek. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brad.
Hey, Rocky, this was a blast. And thank you for the amazing content that you're putting out and the amazing resources that you're sharing with the world. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Brad is on an amazing lifelong journey. Because he has started so early, his work is going to compound to astronomical success in life. He is supercharging his learning by having those who are ahead of him help him to achieve his dreams even faster. Most people never take action. Most people don't start. Like we chatted about, small baby steps can help you move forward. In each area, it helps to have experts to get you there faster. Who are the experts who can get you to the next level? The action step was, what's one thing you can do to add value to someone else? It doesn't take a lot of money or time. Cheering someone on, connecting them with someone else, maybe buying them a book or sharing something that could help them. The world is changing fast, and if you're not constantly learning and improving, you're going to be left behind. You don't need to go back to school. There is so much free learning available on the internet, through books and podcasts. Keep learning and improving yourself. Brad offered his free toolkit of what he finds helpful. You can also check out some of the amazing guests he has on his podcast as well. If you're still listening, you must have liked this episode, so please share it with a few friends. It can start a great conversation, and I would appreciate it as well. You can also connect with me on Facebook. There's both a Facebook page and a Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me. We can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.